days when the rains came.
Throughout the 1960s, radio stations, governments, and even TV hosts scrambled to silence songs they thought were too dangerous, too explicit, or just too rebellious. Some songs were accused of promoting drugs, others were censored for being too sexual, and one track nearly ended a young singer's career just for talking about interracial love. But the funny part of the situation is that every time a song got banned, it just made people want to hear it more. Today we're counting down the 10 most banned and censored songs of the 1960s, the tracks they didn't want you to hear. There's a bonus at the end of the video, so stick around. Number 1, Louie Louie, The Kingsmen, 1963. Have you ever heard a song so dangerous the FBI had to investigate? That's exactly what happened with Louie Louie, one of the most misunderstood tracks in rock history. It wasn't explicit, it wasn't political, but somehow it became the most scandalous song of the decade. In 1963, the Kingsmen, a garage band from Portland, cranked out a raw, slurred, and almost unintelligible version of an old calypso song. The recording was a chaotic mess, off-key, mumbled lyrics, and a beat so loose it was barely holding together. But somehow that messy 3-chord riff worked. The energy was simply electric. But then, controversy struck. Parents and politicians started whispering about the lyrics. What was Jack Ellie really saying? Some swore they heard obscene phrases buried under the slurred vocals. Others claimed it was a secret code for teenage debauchery. One outraged parent sent a complaint to the FBI, and before you knew it, Louie Louie was under federal investigation. For 2 years, agents tried to crack the case. They analyzed the recording, they interviewed band members, and even slowed the song down, hoping to decode the supposed filth hidden in the lyrics. And their conclusion? Inconclusive. That's right, after wasting taxpayer dollars on rock and roll gibberish, the FBI admitted they couldn't figure out what the song says. But the ban hammer had already dropped. Radio stations across the country pulled the track. Some DJs risked their jobs just to play it. But banning it only made the song bigger. Kids had to hear what the fuss was about. By the time the dust settled, Louie Louie had cemented itself as a rock anthem. It had been covered by everyone from The Clash to Iggy Pop, proving that sometimes the best way to make a song legendary is to try and silence it. But if you think that was controversial, just wait until you hear what happened when Barry McGuire dared to question authority. Number 2, Eve of Destruction, Barry McGuire, 1965.
You're old enough to kill, but not for voting.
What if a song could make the government panic? In 1965, Barry McGuire's Eve of Destruction did just that. One song, 3 minutes of raw, apocalyptic folk rock, set off a firestorm that had politicians, radio stations, and even entire countries scrambling to shut it down. The reason? The lyrics. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. That line alone hit like a bomb. Vietnam was escalating, young men were being drafted, and McGuire was calling out the hypocrisy loud and clear. And that wasn't all. He sang about racial injustice, nuclear war, political corruption. No sugarcoating, no patriotic fluff, just pure unfiltered rage. The backlash was immediate. Radio stations refused to play it. Some called it un-American. Others feared it would spark mass hysteria. Politicians denounced it as dangerous propaganda. It was even banned in the UK, with the BBC labeling it too destructive for airplay. But just like Louie Louie, censorship only fueled the fire. Young people connected with the song's message. It climbed the charts, hitting number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Suddenly, Barry McGuire was the voice of a restless, defiant generation. Of course, the establishment fought back. Eve of Destruction was countered with The Dawn of Correction, a government-approved response song. But it didn't matter. The impact was already made. It was proof that music could challenge authority, it could shake the system, and it could get banned for simply telling the truth. And speaking of bans, the Rolling Stones learned that lesson the hard way. Number 3, Let's Spend the Night Together, The Rolling Stones, 1967. Mick Jagger was about to do something unthinkable. It was 1967, and the Rolling Stones were booked to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show, the biggest TV stage in America. But there was a problem. Their latest hit, Let's Spend the Night Together, was causing a meltdown. Why? Because the lyrics weren't just suggestive, they were blatant. Mick wasn't singing about romance, he wasn't using metaphors, he was flat out saying, let's have sex. For 1960s television, that was a huge problem. Ed Sullivan himself demanded a change. He told the band they had to sing Let's Spend Some Time Together. Instead, Jagger resisted. He knew it was ridiculous, but in the end he caved. Sort of. When the performance aired, Mick Jagger sang the altered line, but with an obvious eye roll and smirk that screamed, "This is stupid." The audience got the message. Even with the forced censorship, the controversy raged on. Some radio stations refused to play the track. Moral watchdogs condemned it as a threat to American values. But all the outrage seemed to do nothing to hurt the Rolling Stones. If anything, it made them even bigger. The band's bad boy image was solidified. They weren't the Beatles, they weren't clean cut. They were dangerous. And that danger sold records. Let's Spend the Night Together became one of their signature hits. Jagger got the last laugh. And the Rolling Stones, they learned an important lesson. In rock and roll, scandals sell. But while the Stones were pushing boundaries with sex, another song was sparking outrage for an entirely different reason: race. And Van Morrison found himself in the crossfire. Number 4, Brown Eyed Girl, Van Morrison, 1967.
Hey, where did we go? Days when the rains came.
Brown Eyed Girl is one of those tracks you hear at every barbecue, every wedding, every road trip. It's pure nostalgia, right? But in 1967, this seemingly innocent tune was considered too controversial for mainstream radio. Why? Because the original title wasn't Brown Eyed Girl. It was Brown Skinned Girl. Yep, Van Morrison originally wrote the song about an interracial romance, a subject considered taboo in the 60s, especially in the US, where segregation was barely in the rearview mirror. Record executives weren't having it. They pressured Morrison to change the title and tweak some lyrics to make the song more marketable. And that wasn't the only censorship. One particular line, "Making love in the green grass," was a step too far for certain radio stations. In some versions, it was edited to laughin' and a run-in. Instead, the idea of carefree teenage love, fine. Anything more than that? Absolutely not. But here's the twist. Even with the changes, some stations still wouldn't play it. The song had already been branded as too risque. And despite the censorship, listeners could still tell what Van Morrison was really singing about. But like all the best band songs, Brown Eyed Girl refused to die. It became Van Morrison's biggest hit and remains a huge part of music history to this day. The funny part is that the song's initial controversy is almost completely forgotten now. But you know who wasn't getting off so easy? The Beatles, because their next single had parents convinced it was turning kids into drug addicts. Number 5, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, The Beatles, 1967.
Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
The Beatles had already done it all. Screaming fans, record-breaking hits, even a little mop-top rebellion. But by 1967, they weren't just making pop music anymore, they were making art. And then they dropped Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Right away people noticed something odd. Take the first letters of Lucy, Sky, and Diamonds. What do you get? LSD. The psychedelic imagery, the dreamy, surreal lyrics, tangerine trees and marmalade skies. It had to be about drugs, right? The BBC sure thought so. They slapped an instant ban on the song, citing its alleged LSD references. News outlets ran wild with speculation. Politicians sounded the alarm. The Beatles are corrupting the youth. But John Lennon, he called BS. Lennon insisted the song wasn't about drugs at all. He said his son Julian had drawn a picture of his classmate, Lucy, surrounded by stars. When asked about it, Julian called it Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Lennon thought it sounded poetic and turned it into a song. Was he telling the truth? Who knows? Paul McCartney later admitted the band was experimenting with LSD at the time, but he still backed Lennon's claim that the title was just a coincidence. Either way, the band only made the song more legendary. It became one of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band's most famous tracks, and today, it's one of the Beatles' most iconic songs. Number 6, My Generation, The Who.
Why don't you all fade away? My generation.
Some songs define a generation. This one ignited it. When The Who dropped My Generation in 1965, it was explosive. The aggressive guitars, the snarling attitude, the rebellious lyrics. It was everything rock and roll was meant to be. But there was one thing that made it especially controversial. Roger Daltrey's stuttering vocals. Why don't you all fade away? To some, it sounded like an authentic portrayal of youthful frustration. To others, especially the BBC, it sounded offensive. The issue? Some broadcasters felt the stuttering mimicked people with speech impediments, making fun of them. That was enough for the BBC to ban it. But here's the twist. Pete Townsend, the band's guitarist and songwriter, wasn't mocking anyone. He said the stuttering was meant to capture the nervous energy of young people who felt voiceless in a world ruled by older generations. And let's be honest, the real reason the establishment hated the song wasn't the stutter, it was the message. Hope I die before I get old. That line hit like a grenade. It was the ultimate rejection of authority, a middle finger to conformity, a rallying cry for youth rebellion. Despite the BBC's ban, My Generation blew up. It became The Who's defining song and remains one of the most powerful anthems of rock history. While The Who were causing outrage with their attitude, one band was facing bans for a completely different reason, because their song was supposedly about drugs. And it wasn't even true. Number 7, Puff the Magic Dragon, Peter, Paul, and Mary, 1963.
Oh, Puff the Magic Dragon.
If there was ever a mistake of a controversy, this was it. In 1963, folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary released Puff the Magic Dragon. It was a whimsical song about a little boy and his imaginary dragon friend. Sweet, innocent, harmless, right? Well, not according to the anti-drug crusaders of the 60s. Somewhere along the line, people started noticing certain words. Puff, dragon, paper. Put them together and suddenly, Puff the Magic Dragon wasn't a kid's song anymore. It was a hidden pro-marijuana anthem, or at least that's what people thought. Rumors spread like wildfire. Radio stations started pulling the song. Conservative groups demanded it be banned. The idea that a seemingly innocent children's song was secretly teaching kids about drugs was too scandalous to ignore. But here's the interesting part. It was all nonsense. The song's co-writer, Leonard Lipton, had written the lyrics in 1959 before drug culture had even entered the mainstream. He insisted it was never about weed. Peter, Paul, and Mary backed him up, saying it was simply a song about the loss of childhood innocence. But once the rumor took off, there was no stopping it. Puff the Magic Dragon became one of the most misunderstood songs in music history. And yet, even with all the controversy, it remained a beloved classic. While Puff was falsely accused of being a drug song, another track from the decade actually tackled racial injustice, and it nearly got its young songwriter's career destroyed. Number 8, Society's Child, Janis Ian, 1965.
When she turned and said, but honey, he's not our kind.
Writing a song about interracial dating shouldn't have been dangerous, but in 1965 it was. Janis Ian was just 14 years old when she wrote Society's Child, a haunting ballad about a white girl in love with a black boy. The lyrics weren't sugar-coated, they told the harsh truth of the time. When she turned and said, but honey, he's not our kind, it was bold, it was real, and it was immediately banned. Radio stations refused to play it. DJs who did got threats. Ian herself received hate mail. Some of it was so violent she feared for her life. And just when it seemed like her career might be over before it even started, something incredible happened. Legendary conductor Leonard Bernstein loved the song. He featured it in his 1967 CBS special Inside Pop, The Rock Revolution, introducing Janis Ian's music to a massive audience. Suddenly, stations that had refused to touch it were forced to play it, and it blew up. Society's Child became a hit, proving that music could challenge social norms. and that no amount of censorship could silence the truth. But if you think that's wild, wait until you hear what happened when the Beach Boys used a single word that was way too controversial for 1966. Number 9. God Only Knows, the Beach Boys.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
A song so beautiful even Paul McCartney called it the greatest song ever written. And yet, in 1966, some radio stations refused to play it. Why? Because it dared to say the word God in a love song. Yep, that was enough to cause an uproar. Back in the 60s, mentioning God outside of religious music was scandalous. People felt it was too sacred to be used in a pop song, especially one about romance. Some stations flat out refused to play it. Others hesitated, unsure whether audiences would accept it. And Brian Wilson? He knew it was risky. He even admitted later that he and songwriter Tony Asher were nervous about including the word. But they went for it anyway, and thank God they did. Despite the initial bans, God Only Knows became one of the most cherished songs of all time. It helped solidify Pet Sounds as a masterpiece, influenced countless musicians, and is now widely recognized as one of the greatest songs ever recorded. While the Beach Boys were getting in trouble over one word, another band was causing a full-blown moral panic. Number 10. House of the Rising Sun, The Animals, 1964.
They call the rising sun.
This song had been around for decades. Folk singers had been performing it since the early 1900s, but when the Animals released their electrified version in 1964, the backlash was instant. See, House of the Rising Sun tells the story of a young man who ruins his life in a house of sin. The lyrics are dripping with regret. There's a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. Dear God, I know I'm one. But here's where things got tricky. Some versions of the song made it clear that the Rising Sun was a brothel. Others hinted that it was a gambling den. Either way, religious groups and conservative radio stations saw it as promoting immorality. Many stations refused to play it, and in some places the ban went even further. In the US state of Indiana, the song was pulled from jukeboxes completely. Officials claimed it would corrupt the youth. But did the bans work? Not even close. The controversy only made people more curious. House of the Rising Sun became the Animals' biggest hit. It shot to number 1 in both the US and the UK, and is now considered one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. Next up, we'll be taking a trip back to 1969, when Max Romeo released a song so blatantly sexual, radio stations didn't just ban it, they practically erased it. Bonus, Wet Dream, Max Romeo, 1969.
Every night me go to sleep, me have wet dream.
This one wasn't just controversial, it was legendary in its filthiness. By the late 1960s, reggae was rising, and Max Romeo was a fresh voice in the genre. But when he released Wet Dream, he wasn't just testing boundaries, he was demolishing them. The lyrics weren't subtle. The entire song was one big sexual innuendo. Lines like "Every night me go to sleep, me have wet dream." Yeah, not exactly radio friendly. The BBC took one listen and immediately banned it. No discussion, no second chances. They claimed the song was unsuitable for public airplay. And yet, it became a massive hit. Even without radio play, Wet Dream climbed the charts in the UK. People knew it was banned, and that only made them more desperate to hear it. Some record shops even stocked it under the counter like an illegal substance. Max Romeo later claimed he hadn't meant for the song to be that dirty. He argued that Wet Dream could refer to sleeping in a leaking house. But let's be real, nobody was buying that excuse. Even decades later, Wet Dream remains one of the most infamous banned songs of all time. Which of these songs do you think deserve to be banned, and which ones were just victims of moral panic? Drop your thoughts down in the comment section below. Hit like if you learned something new, and don't forget to subscribe for more music history. See you in the next one.